All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty ambitious. We are tackling a massive challenge, building a mental model to actually understand the overwhelming complexity of global religions. We're going to construct a really simple three-part blueprint to map out this deeply human phenomenon.
Here's the roadmap for today. We're going to establish a framework for faith, then break it down into 3 pillars: believe, do, and belong. And finally, we'll see how this architecture actually looks in practice.
Part 1. A framework for faith, organizing the complex. To wrap our heads around thousands of years of belief systems, we really need a solid structure. So we're kicking things off with a pretty brilliant concept known as the Tripartite Architecture of Faith. Basically, this idea posits that believe, do, and belong give us a super concise framework for understanding almost any tradition out there. Think of it exactly like a building. You've got to have a foundation, a physical structure holding it up, and an interior space.
Moving on to Part 2. The first pillar, believe, the foundation of doctrine.
Now, look closely at how faith is defined here. Notice how it leans heavily on trust, accepting beliefs that might not be empirically verifiable. It's asking the adherent to step totally outside of what we can measure in a lab. Because, well, before a building goes up, the ground absolutely has to be set. This internal, cognitive space is exactly where the deepest convictions of a tradition live. And this foundational pillar breaks down into a couple of key pieces. First up, you have the core doctrines. These are the foundational beliefs, the dogmas and the creeds that a religion actually teaches. But it's way more than just a list of rules. These doctrines totally shape an adherent's entire worldview. It dictates how they understand the world around them, how they view their own purpose, and crucially, how they perceive their relationship to a higher power. Honestly, it's the lens through which they see absolutely everything. All right, Part 3, the second pillar, do, the structure of action. So if belief is the foundation buried underground, doing is the visible scaffolding that everyone sees. Let's walk through this. Step 1 is your everyday rituals. Think prayer, meditation, or worship. Step 2 zooms out to ethical codes, the actual rules governing how you treat the people around you. And then Step 3 brings in those deep spiritual disciplines, like fasting or going on a pilgrimage, which are all designed to push your spiritual growth to the next level. The absolute crucial point here is that this second pillar takes those abstract, unverified beliefs and translates them into real-world moral guidelines. It basically takes the unseen worldview from our first pillar and gives it hands and feet. It dictates what's on your dinner plate, how you spend your paycheck, how you treat the guy living next door, and literally how you structure your daily calendar. Next up, Part 4, the third pillar, belong, the interior community. Religion consistently delivers this massively powerful sense of belonging to a larger group. And we aren't just talking about a casual association here. We're talking about a community bound super tightly by those exact shared beliefs and practices we just covered. This acts as an incredible support network. They provide highly practical care, whether that means organizing meal trains during a family crisis, stepping up with financial help, or just offering a shared, enduring sense of purpose when the world feels totally chaotic.
This just brilliantly illustrates how being embraced by a community like that fundamentally shapes a person. It actually becomes a core piece of your personal identity. You aren't just someone who thinks certain thoughts or goes through certain motions. No, you are a full-fledged member of this specific group. That affiliation literally tells you who you are in the grand scheme of society.
Which brings us to Part 5, the architecture in practice, nuance and prioritization.
Now out in the real world, the emphasis on these pillars is all over the map. One person might totally prioritize the do pillar. They're incredibly focused on strict adherence to rituals and dietary laws, but then someone else might be all about belong, where community festivals and gatherings take the front seat, way ahead of strict theology. And the thing is, neither approach is wrong. They're just different architectural designs built out of the exact same 3 materials.
Ultimately, this tripartite framework, believe, do, belong, it's an amazingly useful starting point. But you have to remember that adherents are always going to find highly unique, completely personalized ways to integrate these elements into their daily lives. Religion isn't a monolith. It's a living, breathing ecosystem where these 3 pillars are constantly interacting, shifting around, and supporting each other, totally depending on a person's individual journey and their unique cultural context.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about how this framework applies outside of the text, right in your very own life. Because whether you consider yourself deeply religious, maybe a bit spiritual, or entirely secular, we all have structures that guide us. So take a step back.
When you examine your own worldview, the actions you take day in and day out, where the communities you lean on when things get tough, which of these three pillars, believe, do, or belong, truly drives you the most? It is a fascinating question to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.